All right. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. And thank you for joining us for the last day of the University of Maryland's Alumni Association's Career Week. Super excited. So today's webinar topic is Mid-Career Changes Amidst the Great Resignation Part 2. This session is brought to you by the Asian Pacific American Alumni Network, also known as APAAN. And my name is Sylvie Song, president of APAAN, and I'll be helping out in the background today. So send me any messages if you need any help. We are joined here by our very own Jennifer Tepper, who is also part of APAAN, and our awesome alumni guest speakers, Wendy Wang and James Wong. A quick reminder that to our participants that this webinar will be recorded, and by participating, you acknowledge and consent to your image, likeness, or voice being recorded. All right, now that that's out of the way, Jennifer, take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. I think people will be coming on as we start this webinar today. Thank you again for spending an hour of your time with us. If you haven't already, please go ahead and take a look at that poll. I just want to get a sense of where folks are who are joining in their professional trajectory. I am an alum of the Smith School of Business, graduated in 2009. I've been a part of APAAN. This is my first year. It's been a fun time with Sylvie as the president of APAAN. We are really excited to share some of our experiences with you, Wendy and James, also folks, alumni who are joining to share their experience and from very different industries and very different points in their career. So we look forward to hearing from them today. It's going to be a really interactive session. I know that there's some emails that went out asking folks to pop questions into a form. And I didn't get any, which is totally fine. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, but we're going to really actively be using the chat function in the Zoom here. So if you guys have any questions, and it can be in a proper question format or any kind of issues that you want to make sure we discuss today, to be mindful of how many participants we plan on having today, please go ahead and start populating that in the chat, okay? We're gonna leave this poll up. It looks like we have maybe for a couple more minutes as people join. We have about 22 respondees so far. And I know we have more than that on the session here. So feel free to populate the chat. And the last thing I will say is our part one series had a lot of multiple things going on at the same time in the chat room. We're really comfortable with that. I hope you are too. I think it keeps us all attuned to various pieces of content, allows us to maximize our time together. You can see commentary from everybody. And so I really hope that you all feel comfortable bringing yourself and your experiences to bear as well as we talk about this. All right. All right, so it looks like from the poll, and again, I mean, Sylvia, I'll leave it to you, but we can leave it open for folks so long as they're joining. Right now, we're looking at the largest population of people here are in kind of their 11 to 15 years of being in the workforce, okay? Following right up with 1 to 5 years, and then 20 plus years, okay? But it looks like we had a pretty good spread of people in their professional experience. This is great. I hope that we can learn from each other. All right, so without further ado, I'm gonna actually kick this off by going over this article. It's from Harvard Business Review. It was from last year, March of 2021, and I'm gonna send it in the chat. What I liked most about this, about marketing yourselves, because a lot of people, I'm sure you have heard, talk about creating your own personal brand. You know, what does that look like? You know, as you embark on your career and continue through your professional life. Okay, and for folks who maybe aren't marketers just naturally or in the communications field, it's a little bit daunting to think about creating your own brand. People don't think about themselves as people, as brands, you know. So that's a lot. We'll get into the tactics of that. But what I liked about this Harvard Business Review article is the fact that it really talked about the work that you guys must do, everybody must do professionally as an individual prior to starting to market yourself. You know, the first thing it talks about is setting an objective. So to set an objective, it's not necessarily, you know, I want to work for X company because that's like the biggest and baddest company in the industry. It's more about, you know, what do you like? It talks about work-life balance, work orientation. So having a sense of self around, you know, am I a team player? Is that actually where I'm happiest, collaborating? Or am I happiest, you know, working individually? Like I'll go to a meeting, hear everybody's thoughts, but I like to just go back to my desk and really knock things out, you know? So understanding that, understanding the work-life balance needs that you have, understanding the skills and experience that you bring to bear, but what else do you want to learn, you know? And then are there things about the culture? You know, we're in much more of a purpose-driven economy right now, you know? So what about the culture of that company, that organization, do you really want to be a part of, that you would, you know, wake up excited to be part of that company, part of that organization? So this article really talks about having that sense of self and that sense of awareness. And then it talks about doing this market research, right? Knowing what other people say about the company, right? And, you know, we talked about this on Monday. Glassdoor is a great resource. If you haven't used it or heard of it, please Google it, take a look at it. And then simply, you know, we talk about SWOT analyses. You know, if you've done, you know, it's the most simple, I think it's a very ubiquitous form of doing a quick analysis, okay? But what it's asking you to do is SWOT yourself, okay? Really think about, and I would say, get a few former colleagues, people you knew in college, you know, friends and family members to, you know, review your SWOT, see if it's an accurate assessment of who you are. It's not only enlightening practice, but understanding what your strengths are and being able to articulate them. This exercise will help you articulate them. Your weaknesses, you know, and then, you know, how do you write that down? If you were having a family member read it, how would you write your weaknesses down? Maybe that's a really great way for you to talk about yourself and the challenges that you'd like to overcome as a professional. You know, what kind of opportunities are you excited about? And what kind of threats? What really constrains you as a professional? You know, we talk about the Great Resignation. There's a lot of articles about that right now. And one of the biggest threats that's coming up is mandating coming back into the office. Okay, you know, people are really coming to terms with the fact that they don't want to come back into the office. And then from there, we can get into what we'll talk about a little more tactically later on in this hour about building your brand. What does that mean? So it's in here. Sylvie also just put it in the chat, the link. I really recommend, if you guys have some time to really think about this and do that due diligence, kind of internal self-assessment, because that's really going to help you know how best to you know, build that brand, or what that brand is that you are going to market about yourself. So with that, I'm going to actually pause. I'm going to encourage everybody to throw questions up. I want to see what folks really want to make sure that we address today. I don't see any yet. Please feel free to throw things up in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to turn our attention to one of the panelists, Wendy. Wendy's going to talk from two perspectives, one as a hiring manager and one in her own personal journey in her professional career. So go ahead, Wendy, take it away.
Thanks, Jennifer. Just to give a little background to myself, I'm a 1997 grad from the University of Maryland with a women's studies degree and a minor in Asian American women. And during my time there, I think one of the probably the most, or the thing that I'm proudest of most, is being part of the student movement to establish the Asian American Studies program there. But right out of college, I actually immersed myself in the jazz world. So it's currently the Herbie Hancock Institute of Jazz, Blue Note Jazz Club, New England Conservatory of Music. So I went to Boston, New York, and did, you know, those are early years. So I feel like that gives you kind of a buffer in your early years to kind of explore. But then I quickly transitioned into luxury hospitality. And the main reason for that was, and I joined the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company because someone had I had someone look at my resume and evaluate kind of my background. And they're like, you jump around too much and you don't stay. It looks like you're not committed. And so because of that, I wanted to, I'm in my late 20s. So at that point, I think it's great I wanted to go with align myself with a strong brand. So yeah, that's why I selected the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company and made myself stay there for 4 years. And it's probably one of the best professional experiences to date. And then from there, I did become like a contractor entrepreneur, wanting to go back into the art space, and did festival logistics and book venues. And then, in that time, I also had children. So now I'm currently at the Capital Area Food Bank in Washington, D.C. in management. So that's nonprofit. So I'm just quickly giving you a wide range of what I've done and how I've transition myself from industry to industry. And I think, something that I'm sure many of you can identify with is in most of your positions or job, there are probably some key skill sets that you enjoy or that you find yourself always, involved with. So I always spin myself and link myself to logistics, like event coordination, client engagement, customer, satisfaction. So I think you can take these little nuggets and spin it in different ways. So it doesn't sometimes it looks strange that maybe you're going from industry to industry, but then when telling your story, it actually makes sense. And just so you know, in my current position, I actually had applied for a specific program to coordinate. But then they asked me to, because of my management experience in the past, they asked me to become a manager. So also, you don't know what's going to come from the other end just based on your background. So, that's kind of, and for those that are in the 20 plus years space, that's where I am in terms of work experience. So yeah, just to kind of give you a wide, an overview of just, I don't think it's so challenging to transition unless you find the through line through everything. I think that's a key piece. And then Jennifer, what was the other part so to speak about?
Yeah, just kind of as a hiring manager, what stands out? Yeah.
So believe it or not, and maybe it's different for different industries, but cover letter. Cover letter is key to me because it's an argument that you're making that you're the best candidate. We get tons of resumes. So but the cover letter, which I find people are now either not engaged with as much anymore. So when I see those resumes with a cover letter, I read those first because everyone has their resume, but it's like, how do you write? How are you presenting yourself beyond just what's on your resume? So it's like your story. It doesn't need to be more than a page, but it gives you another layer. So that's been, and also following instructions. Like if it's asked to provide a cover letter, I think it's important to follow instructions and also provide a cover letter. So I know there's a lot of, I think, articles or just people talking about that, employers don't look at cover letters, or it's a waste of time. I actually disagree. It really helps me kind of filter when I'm looking for candidates. And, I think what's also important, what I'm finding is being able to, and this is just recently with numerous interviews that we've had, and a kind of reference that it's more entry level or kind of mid-level opportunities. So those are kind of in the director or senior level. Maybe this is not applicable, but what I'm finding is questions that I ask about organization and even the basics of taking notes. How do you manage information? It's actually very interesting because many people don't know how to actually answer that. And for me, I want to know that if we're in a fast-paced environment, how are you processing that information, and how are you actually then noting it down, as opposed to, I don't know how people, they're just listening. So I just, it's important to see how do you manage that information and then turn it around into your space, especially if, with working remote. I think that's a challenging part as a manager. What are you really doing behind your screen, aside from hitting milestones and deadlines, but, kind of really understanding your workflow and how you time manage. So
thanks. No, this is great, Wendy. I mean, I think that you're really getting to what we started talking about right in the beginning, is that awareness of self around how do you work? What are your preferred ways of working, and how do you make yourself successful? I want to thank folks who are really jumping in the chat, and I'm seeing a lot of questions there, which is really, really exciting. I'm not going to go in chronological order, but I really like, but I will try to get to all of them. So the first question here is that I see is from Tina, which is about, how do you suggest we market ourselves without sounding like we are bragging in person? I have my resume centered around my accomplishments and working on updating my LinkedIn profile to include a better picture of my brand. Any tips for our LinkedIn profile? So I'm just going to say this right out loud. Socially, I think in a lot of cultures, bragging is looked upon as, a lot of puffing up of chests. It's not looked upon very favorably. I think we need to accept that when we are marketing ourselves, especially for this purpose, that bragging is part of you articulating that you are able to provide a service to that company or that organization who is seeking. So if you kind of change your mindset that this isn't about like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna, I really wanna show off. Instead, what you're really doing is saying that, hey, your company will be better served if I'm at the table with you. Okay. And so the question now you're really kind of reframing is, what you're really reframing is, why you're going to help that company in ways better than anybody else would. Okay. So I'm using company kind of interchangeably with nonprofit organization, whatever, hiring entity. So I think it's really, helpful if you change the way you think about the bragging, but instead you're doing them a service. It makes it a little bit easier to say, yeah, I actually have a lot of experience around this and I can talk to it, and I can really support your company or your organization. With regards to LinkedIn, I actually copied this out. Okay. This is my LinkedIn kind of bottom, and I would argue it is like right under my name, the little 175 characters that you get, and I would argue it's too long, frankly. But I have almost 25 years of work experience, so to help me with the through line that Wendy talked about, that for me, if you look at everything I've done, it would seem scattered as well, but is that I'm amazing at growing things, okay? From a revenue perspective, from engagement, from advocacy, organizing, civil rights. I'm great at growing things. And I've done it in the nonprofit sector. And in doing so, I've become extremely adept at a lot of technologies that help people do that. Okay, so I try to summarize that in a way that appeal every company. I don't know a single company that doesn't have some aspiration to grow. Okay, so I did this to put myself out in a way that I can be of service to anybody who's thinking about growing. And I happen to have a whole lot of expertise in the nonprofit sector, so I kind of add that in. Okay. Anybody else want to chime in on that? I'm sorry if I'm taking a little bit of space. I hope that's helpful, Tina. And I do see some other questions coming in, so I'll get to those momentarily. Wendy, James, do you have anything to add to this question?
Yeah, about the feeling of like you're bragging on your LinkedIn. I've noticed that, as you're getting more senior in your career, you kind of have to make that move, because I don't want to think of it as necessarily bragging, but people want to know that how you are making an impact in whatever organization or whatever your field is. And if you can really explain how you are doing that. So for example, like I did X, Y, and Z to reduce the overhead cost by X amount, and you can go into detail about that. I wouldn't consider that bragging. I think that's just what you had to do in order to achieve that. So kind of like going along the lines of like changing that mindset. If you can really explain how you did it, I wouldn't consider that bragging at all. And that's exactly what employers want to hear.
Absolutely. People are interested in what experiences you had that led you to the place that you are, that then makes you interested in them, you know? So a couple other questions here. I'm gonna, there are two questions about applying. So one's more of a transition, a job transition, but that there was a gap because of, you know, as you guys can see in the chat, a gap. This is from Faye. Because her husband was terminally ill. Okay, so how do you return to an industry that you left? Because you probably went to one that was a little more flexible at that time. Related to that is, and I'm really sorry, is it Kea or Kia? I'm sorry if I said that wrong.
Yeah, thank
Kea?
you.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. But similarly, you know, there's a family medical special need that you have to take care of, right? And so how do you kind of approach that or introduce that, you know, to, and that's Wendy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as somebody who hires. You might have somebody who's highly qualified, but there is a personal obligation, you know, do you bring that up right up front, you know, or how do you navigate that, you know?
Yeah, no, so I think there's two ways. You could bring it up front, or which, you know, for me it's helpful, but you know, even you can wait until if you're offered the position or the opportunity. So for, you know, as we're in this kind of the past 2 years really learning or adjusting to remote work, you know, it's been great in the sense that I can better understand what people can and cannot do, not cannot do, but just working with people in a much more flexible way. So I think, you know, when offering the position, you know, definitely, you know, it's recommended to be upfront, because then we can better have a honest conversation of, you know, how can we support you, or how can we adjust. You know, if we think you're a great candidate, how can we adjust to maybe your schedule of the support that you may need to provide? So, and this is understanding what your needs are. So, and then how does it complement the work that we're doing? You know, like if you're working in the weekends or if it's evening, you know, so it's then really working with you and understanding kind of what the workflow is and how that matches, you know, what needs to be done for, you know, what we need to get accomplished. And if that can be met, you know, I think that's fine. Like, we're open to that. I mean, we have different, you know, we haven't had any, I think, you know, just like I don't have transportation, and we're in the programs that I run, you have to be in the field. So it's like then asking questions about, you know, metro and public transportation. I mean, that's, you know, different to what you're asking, but having those transparent conversations so then we can better support you and your goals and in your journey with the organization. I mean, if you're able to do the work, I mean, that's key. And it's like, how can we better support you with your schedule and what you need to, you know, what you're responsible for.
James, did you have anything to add there? Because I do want to address Faye's question.
Yeah, just real quick. I think, you know, if you have any sort of needs that are outside of work, like you're dealing with a special needs child, or let's say like you have sick parents or something, I think that's definitely something you need to bring up. Maybe not immediately, but I think probably like midway towards the end of the interview process. If the hiring manager really likes you and like really wants to hire you, they will make an effort to work with whatever kind of constrictions you have. And I've seen that with multiple candidates that my company has hired. So we've made like work from home arrangements, or if there's some sort of like visa issue, we try to hire them temporarily until they have their visa sorted out.
Can I just follow up on what you said?
Sure.
James, a lot of the positions I apply for have a string of interviews, like a first interview, and then you get to the second stage and the third stage. And they're different people, like the hiring manager and maybe you're some department head or something, whatever it is. So when would you bring that up is kind of where I'm going with that, because I guess hiring manager, I don't know.
Yeah, I would say like probably before like the final interview, or like when you're interviewing with the hiring manager, the one who's actually going to be like your manager and working with you day to day. Because I think like they're going to need to know how to pitch you and how to make arrangements, because I think that's going to take a little bit of time if they do decide to hire you.
Thanks, James. I would say to the question about Faye's really kind of, asking about employers not liking the gap, people taking a gap or a little break from career. I think there's also some other comments here around that gap and kind of coming back to work in their late 40s. Joan has that a question around how we can maybe help with some cover letter hints. Look, I said this in my first, in the part one, the Monday session. I have 8 children total, 5 of them biological. The oldest one is almost 20. I have 3 that are under the age of 3 right now. I also have hyperemesis gravitarum. So all of my pregnancies required me to be bedridden and I had to stop working. I have a lot of medical reasons why, and my father passed away. There's, life happens, right? And I think COVID has really blown the lid out of how life happens for people, no matter, it is the great equalizer around that, okay? Didn't matter if you were an executive or, somebody who's, just a line worker, everybody's seeing COVID affect their families, okay? And their ability to work. So, no, generally, no, employers don't love the gap, but this goes back to that HBR article, right? The Harvard Business Review article on, I actually went with my 3-year-old now, specifically went and found an organization that I believed in that had a culture where the kids were really welcomed in the office. So I spent his first 18 months of life taking him to work every day, nursing him, in meetings, taking time to change him. And it wasn't easy. And it was not necessarily a unicorn, but it was that due diligence that I put in to find a place that one would work with who I am, needed my skills, but also had that culture of, really wanting to support women in the workforce at whatever stage they were in, So I think that that due diligence goes a long way, because I probably could have applied to a lot of things that I was skilled for, and it would have been very frustrating because I would not have known that those places would not match my kind of criteria in where I am in my work-life balance, to kind of meet my needs. And if you found that, those employers may not be as strict around caring about that gap. They may understand, hey, you have the skills, but of course, you had a terminally ill spouse, that is a time where you need to be there for them, So I put that out there. There's one last question I want to turn, and I mean, one last for this segment here, turn to James to talk about his experience kind of and marketing himself. There's a question up top. Daniel asked, how do we change self-view upon retirement? And I know that this group from the poll, not everybody's there. Everybody hopes to be there, I expect, but not everybody's there. I'm going to take a little bit of a stab at this and assume that you're talking about, maybe you had a career in, say, finance, and now you want to kind of change direction in retirement. How do you change that self-view upon it? I got to tell you, my husband's 11 years my senior. He's exactly in that space. He's been a CFO his whole career, both for-profit and nonprofit. He wants to captain sailboats for the rest of his life. Okay. And honestly, what's happening is he is feeling a lot more permission and giving himself that permission to talk about things that are, and I think societally, again, part of this great reevaluation, great resignation is that people are bringing themselves to work a whole lot more, and they want places that get that. So he's going through a process of really being extremely candid with, with work about where his life is headed, where his goals are, how he wants to live, the level of transience that we're going to have in our life. And, and what that leads to in his kind of last couple stages of life, and what that's going to look like. Not just going to beat a dead horse about that self-evaluation and due diligence, but knowing that that's where you want to go and giving yourself permission to talk about it with employers. You will find that employers, other companies, colleagues, you'll find that folks are really excited because they too often have those conundrums, around how to talk about it. So you'll find them really excited to hear that you're giving permission and in that space to talk about how you're rebranding yourself, how you want to, move your life in a different direction. So keep populating the chat room. We'll get back to it as well, but I want some time to let James talk a little bit about, his own personal journey as well.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated, I'm a little bit on the less experienced side, but I'm like mid-career right now. So I graduated in 2010 with a degree in mechanical engineering. I started off working at Accenture actually for a couple of years, and then decided that kind of wasn't for me. So I went back to grad school and kind of did a little bit of not necessarily soul searching, but kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. So while in grad school, I bounced around with different tech companies until I eventually ended up in the Bay Area, and I'm working with Tesla right now, and I've been there for a couple of years now, about 6 years. And even within Tesla, I've been bouncing around doing a bunch of different things. So I started off working like on the motors, and then I did a little bit of manufacturing and analytics. And finally, I'm working on like hardware reliability engineering for the superchargers. So as far as like marketing myself and kind of making that transition, I think one important thing is kind of showing your passion either for that space or for the type of products that you're working on. So like I've always been someone who's like super interested in tech. And when I was interviewing, and even when I interview candidates for to hire them as well, I try to see like what some of their passions are outside of work. And when we talk about some of the technical subjects or the things that you might be dealing with, like, are you talking with that same amount of passion for the type of work you would be doing versus the stuff outside of work? Because what I've seen is like if they can really talk a lot about it and are very passionate, like that is one of the things that will probably trump like any sort of technical experience or even just amount of experience in general, because that shows that person is willing to learn and they can kind of roll with the punches, as we say here. But yeah, I think like showing your passion for whatever industry or company you're applying to is going to be probably one of the things that helps you go over the edge, in my opinion.
Thanks so much, James. I'm looking for any questions here. I think, there's one that Evelyn and Michelle was also interested in, and Sylvia and I have addressed it in the chat, but I'd be curious, Wendy, if you and James have anything to add here. How would you navigate career change with 15 years of work experience with transferable skills, but not meeting the required years in a new field for a mid-level job?
I feel like there must be a link somewhere. I feel like there's transferable skills. If you have 15 years experience, I think, I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong, but I always feel there's something that you can transfer, or just maybe express what James was saying, or like your passion or the interest for why you want to, you know, transfer into this new industry, whether it's a personal story or whatever it is that's making you want to make that jump, perhaps. But I feel like there's some transferable skills somewhere. So, you know, maybe it's having somebody else to look at your resume, or just seeing, or maybe have some more conversation with you to maybe look at that job post and see how, you know, how they match, or there's some similarities. But I think that's you know, I think you should apply if that's something you're really passionate about. And I know in the previous, like on Monday's session, I think the informational interview came up. So approaching it kind of in relation to that job, but, you know, trying to locate that person from that department, perhaps, and then reaching out for an informational interview. So it's maybe I mean, I don't know how you angle that. It's just like, it's more, I think, flexible. Like, it's to get information, better understand the opportunity. And I've done that before, and it's worked and not worked, but I think it's just, you know, you're trying to maximize your opportunities. So that was you know, another strategy that came up as well. But I would want to say, like I keep on saying, I'm sure there's transferable skills, but I think just like your interest and passion for that, and then explaining that, maybe, as I had said earlier about the cover letter, because sometimes I also feel the cover letter can explain or capture something that the resume can't, because resume, like, you see that gap. You don't have to go so much into it in the resume, but you can kind of have it, you know, reference. There are ways to kind of express that gap or kind of acknowledge it in a way, you know, so it's not like you're hoping that the employer doesn't see the gap on the resume, but you're acknowledging it. And then also, I want to address the gap. I don't know if, you know, if you're volunteering or just maybe doing other work too, like that, to me, counts. Like, you're staying engaged, even being a caretaker too, like, that's work. There's, you know, that's, I think once you get to that level, like for someone like me, I can see that connection, and that's also work. I mean, that's the kind of commitment, you know, that you're spending your time. So, you know, once again, it's also, in the end, how does the, you know, your experience and what your intentions are, skill set, and then, you know, are you able to meet, you know, our goals and objectives, and how can we, you know, support each other? So I know it's challenging, but also it's like, you don't give up. Like, you just have to keep on applying, and not necessarily reinventing yourself, but, you know, taking that time to reevaluate and adjusting where you can on your resume or cover letter.
Absolutely. James, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. To expand on transferable skills, definitely. I think, especially with the amount of experience that you have, I'm sure there's something that is transferable to the jobs that you're interested in, whether it could be probably something on the softer side, like, you know, you've demonstrated how you're a self-starter, or you can deal with people and know how to manage. I think a lot of things that employers are looking for in general, at least when I've interviewed, is just like, how do you deal with ambiguity? And I'm sure, like, within the last 15, 20 years of your career, like, you've had to deal with either something, some extraordinary circumstance, or like something where the requirements weren't exactly clear. So I think bringing those type of experiences up and highlighting those in your resume or LinkedIn would be extremely valuable. And also, I think this is probably specific to the tech industry, but I've noticed a lot of postings right now are specifically for people who've had career gaps. I've seen, I know Tesla, the company I'm working for now, they have some programs specifically for like people who have taken a couple years gap, and I've seen the same thing at Apple too. So I think that's something to look into as well.
Two things I want to just quickly add to this. Sometimes it really matters the sector though. So I will say that, Evelyn, I see what you're saying in the chat here. Sometimes it's not as flex if you're applying for like a government job, like their years of expertise, like what they need from you because of the pay band that you are going to be applying into is fixed. So, you know, they need that validation to say that you fit in this role. If it's government, like federal government jobs, things like that, you might not have some of the flex that we are kind of, you know, riffing on right now. But what I will say is that in the nonprofit sector, and I've seen in the corporate sector, as James is attesting to and Wendy have attested to, you know, so you kind of get into the head about and this is to the informational interviews as well, try to understand why they put that there. So I've hired for many, many organizations, and sometimes I put that there because I don't want somebody to BS me about their skills, okay? Like if I'm hiring a social media marketing coordinator type person, you know, I wanna know that they really understand using social media to move a mission, not to get likes from their own personal like Snapchat page, you know? And so sometimes I put that in to help see if somebody comes through, and like Sylvie's saying, yes, apply anyway if you really can do those skills. But I do that as a barrier of entry because I want to see more seasoned people. However, I want to see more seasoned people that really can do those skills or have done it professionally. But it would be flexible if a younger person came in and really could do those skills professionally. I would also say that some companies want, and this kind of goes back to Joan and also Daniel's question about retiring or kind of switching the gears. Some people, you know, do really want those years of experience because it's not so much, it's as much the skill as the experience in the industries or various industries doing that job that they want. They want that wisdom in from a variety of different years of working in a variety of different sectors doing that work. So, you know, understand if you can have a informational call with the hiring manager to see why that's there, because that will save you a lot of time, you know, in terms of applying and really understanding if there is that flex that you're talking about. Okay. And I do agree with Sylvie too. A lot of job posts, depending on the industry, are templates. So let's see. At James, there's a question for you. For people with engineering or computer software degrees after 2-year gap due to the pandemic, will they be treated as out of date while looking for new jobs in the tech field?
I'm not sure about software specifically, but the fundamentals don't really change. So I don't think you know, a gap of 2 years is going to be much in terms of being seen as out of date. Yeah, sure. Like you might have like new versions of software coming out, or there might be some hot new programming language here. But you know, fundamentally, I would say programming is the skill set for programming is the same. So whether like you know a language or not isn't really going to matter, in my opinion. I think just one more thing about that. I think as long as you can show that you're still active, like if you have like a GitHub you're contributing to, working on any other open source projects, just going along the lines of like showing that you're still active and being engaged. That's going to be the important part.
I was just going to add, for those that are like transitioning or trying to go into a whole nother industry, what Jennifer was talking about. I know sometimes, yes, there's like specific requirements, whether it's, you know, they're looking for a certain type of education. I think for me, when I was transitioning back into nonprofit, I did do a nonprofit certification at Georgetown. I mean, it could be anything. I feel like nowadays, like there's a certification for many things. You know, I know you don't want to break your bank, and I don't want to break mine either. So I do try to look for like a reputable institution that's like maybe 2,000, you know, just not like $8,000-$10,000, like you're dropping so much money, you're putting so much money into it. And maybe like through your LinkedIn network or just your own professional network, maybe there's some, I've done this before, just well, I'm trying to do it now is to reconnect myself with the jazz world, is help with a nonprofit. It's like volunteering, or hey, you know, is there like a little project that I can sink my teeth in? I have like all this logistical background, but how can I apply it to your, you know, company or organization? And that, you know, make it small, so it's not like this long-term commitment, and just to get something on your, you know, to build out your resume.
Thank you, Wendy. So quick reminder, we have about 12 to 13 minutes left in this. I want to make sure if there are any pressing questions that you're putting it in here so we can answer them. I also know that, you know, I want to make sure that we talk about kind of these must-dos for marketing ourselves. So I just want to recap this before we run out of time. One, a little bit of self-discovery, okay? Really get a sense of, you know, what you want out of your career, you know. I will say that self-discovery for me most recently has moved me into self-employment, okay, and becoming my own, starting my own consultancy. So have some of that self-discovery, know what you need. Two, you know, Zoe actually has been really great. She hasn't had any questions, but she's been chiming in. So I really appreciate that. You know, go back to the alumni, this alumni group with this whole week's resources that have been put out for you. There's a lot of stuff on resume writing, cover letter stuff. Use those as a must do to kind of make sure that your passion comes out. James has talked about that. Wendy's talked about that. Make sure that your transferable skills are articulated in a way that makes sense in whatever switch industry you're looking at going into. Use informational interviews, get those questions answered from hiring directors, especially if they outsource the hiring. A lot of these companies are open to answering some basic questions before they do an informational interview to see if you're a potential candidate. And I would say, don't worry about I know it's hard about the bragging, but switch that mindset about, hey, I just kind of want to show and tell my experience. You know I can be of service for you. Switch that mindset and know that it's a big win-win if you can articulate how you could be of service to them, you know, and I think that's extremely helpful. And so since I've been just rambling on here, we have a couple quick questions that have come through. One, I'm an alum with a tech degree currently living outside of the US. How can I find an employer who sponsors H-1B visas? As soon as the employers know that I'm not in the US, they lose interest. Can marketing my skills in a good way help me to have them sponsor me? Okay, James, you probably work with that more than Wendy and I do, just out of, you know, in the tech world. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think if you're able to have a really good interview, the employers are going to make it happen no matter what. And I've seen that with a couple of the people that we've hired. So I think marketing your skills in a good way, and then like really just crushing the interview. If the hiring manager likes you, they're going to do whatever they can. And I've kind of been saying this a lot for a lot of people's questions, but like if they really want you, they'll figure out how to make it happen. Whether it's they get your H-1B, or they might put you in like a satellite office outside the US temporarily until they can get that sorted.
That's great, James. And then we have, for someone who is an introvert, I'm struggling to find even my strength to put on my resume cover, to find my own strengths to put on my resume cover. I'm better critiquing others' resumes than my own. Sad face. This is why I say when you do the SWOT, you really should bring other people close to you into it. You know, either as readers or as people who know you. So these are professional colleagues. These are people who've, you know, maybe went to school with you. These are even family members. You can agree to disagree with them at the end, but if you're, you know, kind of hitting a block, I would, they're recruiting you, James. I would definitely work with some people around that. Wendy, James, do you have anything else around that?
Well, this one is kind of awkward because Zoe, I think, was actually my manager at Accenture. Yeah, but I think getting other people to talking with other people and kind of discussing what you've done and how what you've done and what your strengths are. That's going to be really important because I have the same problem as well. I struggle with finding out like what my impact was. And I have to talk with, get feedback from a lot of different people to see what actually did happen.
That's great. So before, yes, Sylvie's responding to somebody else's questions. Perfect. Before we, end this thing, I did ask if anybody wanted to share an elevator pitch or their top level LinkedIn kind of a way in which they're branding themselves, how they're marketing themselves now. I don't know if anybody took time to do that exercise, but for those who did, if you want to just throw up in the chat box for everybody to review, I mean, this is an opportunity for you to get some insights and constructive criticism if that's kind of what you want to get from this group. I don't see anybody putting anything in, and I went ahead and shared with you what mine was. What are those 3 or 4 lines that you quickly can articulate about your own professional skills, expertise? As I'm waiting. All right, I wanted to make that available, but I also know that if people aren't ready to do that or put themselves out there, I definitely, oh, here's one. Thank you, Zoe. So I don't know if you guys can all see this in the chat. So I'm gonna, just, and I'm just gonna disclaimer this. This is for education purposes. I hope nobody takes any offense to any of this, but the goal of this is really, making sure that folks get some key takeaways that they can act on, So what I would say is, thanks, Zoe. What I would say is, you got to really know why you want somebody to know, for example, you're a cat lover. Like, what's the relevance here? So if you are applying for a job with the Humane Society, perfectly relevant, right? If that's kind of where you want to go, or rescue animals, or volunteer work around that, perfect. That makes a lot of sense. But if you're looking for a job in tech as a business salesperson, you probably would want to adjust that tagline. Now, this is where it really matters because a lot of people ask questions about, do I change what I need to do for each job? Because your LinkedIn isn't really that nimble, right? Like your LinkedIn is kind of your whole entire way of which you want the world to see you professionally, right? So, again, you're more than welcome to. Every single job needs you. They say this all the time. You really need to speak to what the job description is and what that organization or company is doing. But there is a question of, are you doing that to really get an interview, or is that the kind of job you really have a passion about? Okay, so again, that really goes into kind of, what are you looking for in a career? All together, and your LinkedIn should say that. So Robin offers strategic mindset, drug development driver, inspirational leader, passionate about DEI. Okay, what do you guys think of that?
I mean, for me, if we were interviewing you, I mean, this is just, I think it's great in terms of its strategy. We do a lot of strategy work. We are currently very engaged in DEI work. And that's actually a committee that I'm part of, so seeing that is, that kind of jumped out at me. And then of course, like we're not doing drug development, but the fact that you're a driver, like development, like that's part of, you know, the nonprofit work that we do. And then I don't know, maybe I'd have to further speak with you, like, because we do a lot of pilot programs with health initiatives. So maybe the drug development driver, there's something related there. So yeah, there's like these, I think it's pretty good. I mean, I can definitely get nuggets from it that would kind of pique my interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Robin, I really like it. I think, you know, I think the only thing is just not knowing where you are in your career. If you're kind of in that 1 to 5 year career timeline, you know, I might question how much experience do you have to really back up, you know, those taglines. You know, have you really led a strategic planning, you know, process? You know, have you been in a role to inspire people as a leader? I mean, those are all things that have to sync with what your experience list also then shows, you know, but as a tagline, it's fantastic. How about for people not interested in using LinkedIn? Could they still land a job? In essence, yes, but, you know, we are remiss we should bring this up. Recruiters look at all your social. Okay. You should know that now, if you don't know that, you know, so is it helpful to have a LinkedIn? Yes, it's very, very helpful. Is it impossible to get a job if you don't have one? No, it's not impossible, you know, but recruiters do like to see that kind of peer-to-peer validation that LinkedIn provides when people can recommend you, where you have followers and you have a network to connect into. James, go ahead.
Yeah, this is going to be specifically for tech, but yeah, any code repositories that you could show off. So if you have a GitHub, I mentioned this before, but yeah, if you have a GitHub, definitely want to mention that on your resume, because that's how people are going to evaluate your technical skills. Before, I would say like that would be a big thing for employers to evaluate your technical skills, even above like a resume.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, and there's for someone who seems to be a little bit younger, recent comms grad, a communications grad from the University of Maryland, seeking international development opportunities. You know, I would, I don't know, you know, you could take you can take recent off because it can look down and see when you graduated, and that can connect the dots there. I would be a little more specific on connecting the comms with the international development. It seems like you're saying two very different things right there, unless you're saying you want to be a comm strategist, you know, working in foreign or international aid or something like that, you know, aspiring to be, or if there's comms graduate with experience, like if you had an internship in that world, you know, prior to graduating at Maryland, you can highlight that internship, and then underneath you know how LinkedIn says open to work, you know, then it makes it clear that you are open to work in that field. And we got 1 more minute. 2 quick questions here. How to respond when recruiters ask for all of our socials, including Facebook, even if it's our private one, not brand. You know, I would just be really clear about your privacy settings, you know, and what you use your socials for, you know. So if recruiters ask, you can say, I do have a Facebook. It's specifically for my family and friends. It is, you know, it is, privately, like whatever, it's locked, whatever that, I'm forgetting the word right now, but it is locked, or, you know, you can't see it, whatever, but you might find it. I just think you're upfront about what you use them with. And if it is public, like your Instagram's public, be very aware of what it may be conveying or connoting of you. Okay. And then there's one last tagline there: DI specialist, behavioral scientist, vaccine development expert, public health advisor, physician. I know. Oh, so now we are kind of at time. You know, Kay, I would say that yours is great. It feels a little bit. It feels a little bit like you've done all of it. Where do you want to go? you know, you want to work in health equity. So maybe what I would really focus on is DEI specialist with a passion for equity in health. Okay. And then your experiences will show the behavioral scientist, you know, vaccine development expert. So some of that is, you know, important to show that you have health experience, but what you should really highlight that passion and where you want to go in the tag. For those we didn't get to, we are a minute late. I really love these sessions. It's been a lot of fun. I want to thank Wendy. I want to thank James for spending your time with us. You know, there will be a follow-up. We will send the link. We will send, you know, you can email us if we didn't get to you and you want some personalized feedback. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. I have sent the YouTube playlist for all the UMD Career Week recordings in the chat, so please keep checking. More videos will be added next week since we're all sort of recording it this week, so continue checking. And like Jennifer said, we will also send this recording to you in your email so you have a copy of that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. And we hope to see you at a future Alumni Association event in the future, and have a wonderful day. Stay healthy and go Terps.